It was a Saturday morning. Coffee going cold on the workbench. I had a stack of 2x4s leaning against the garage wall, a plan I'd printed off some homesteading blog, and about 4 hours before my family expected me to have something to show for the weekend. By noon, I had a pile of wood that didn't fit together and a measurement error I couldn't explain. Most people reading that sentence just felt something in their chest, because that feeling, that specific mix of embarrassment and frustration and money you can't get back, is one that a lot of woodworkers carry quietly. But here's what I want you to ask yourself. What if the problem was never your skill? What if every time a project fell apart, it wasn't you that failed? It was the plan. Most people in this situation assume they need more practice, more YouTube videos, maybe better tools. I thought the same thing for years, but after building from dozens of plans, free downloads, magazine tear-outs, paid bundles, I started noticing a pattern that had nothing to do with skill. Almost every plan I worked from had the same invisible flaw. Not obvious, not labeled, just gaps. Steps that assumed you already knew what came next. Measurements that were technically correct on screen but wrong the moment they met real lumber at the store. There's a name for this in the woodworking community, though nobody really talks about it out loud. I call it the unfinished plan problem. A plan that looks complete. Professional layout, numbered steps, clean diagrams. But the person who designed it never actually built it. They drew it. And there's a difference, a significant, expensive difference, between a plan that was drawn and a plan that was built, tested, and corrected before it reached your hands. I've been woodworking for years, and it took me longer than I'd like to admit to realize that most of the plans out there, including the ones you pay for, were never tested in a real shop. They were drafted, cleaned up, and published. That's it. And that single fact explains more failed projects than any lack of skill ever could. Let me walk you through what this actually looks like in practice, because I want you to recognize these moments, not as failures, but as evidence of exactly what I'm describing. The first scenario, you find a plan for a storage bench, decent photos, clean layout. You buy the lumber on the list, get home, and start cutting. Everything feels right until step 7, when the instructions tell you to attach the face frame, except nobody told you how to square the carcass first. You improvise. It looks almost right. But the drawer gaps are uneven, the lid doesn't sit flush, and you end up telling yourself you'll fix it later. You never do. The bench is still in the corner of your garage, you walk past it twice a day. And this is where most people make a mistake that costs them months. They assume the problem is that they're not experienced enough yet. So they wait. They buy more tools. They watch more videos. But they never build the thing, because deep down they're not confident the next plan will be any different from the last one. The second scenario, you find a plan for a chicken coop. Your backyard is ready. You've got the space, you've got the time, you've got a neighbor who mentioned she'd love one too. You download the free plan, skim through it, and it looks solid enough. You head to the lumber yard with the materials list. Here's what nobody tells you about most free plans. The materials list was written based on nominal lumber dimensions, not the actual milled size you get off the shelf. So the boards you buy are slightly narrower than the plan assumes, and you don't catch it until you're halfway through the frame, wondering why nothing is squaring up the way the diagram shows. You spend the next 2 Saturdays trying to compensate. You never finish the coop. Your neighbor stops asking about it, and somewhere in the back of your mind a quiet voice says maybe this just isn't for you. The part that surprised me most was how universal this experience is. I've talked to woodworkers at every skill level, people who've been doing this for 2 years and people who've been doing it for 20, and almost all of them described the same thing. A moment mid-project where the instructions stopped making sense and they didn't know if it was the plan or themselves. Third scenario, you decide to invest this time. You buy a plan bundle, not a free download, an actual paid collection. Hundreds of plans. You pick a shaker end table to start. Simple lines, beginner-friendly. Good first project. You follow every step carefully. Step 4 asks you to cut tenons. The dimensions in the diagram don't match the dimensions in the cut list. Width where the thickness should be. You don't catch it because you've never built a tenon before and you don't know what wrong looks like yet. You cut based on the diagram. $60 of lumber, Wrong. You find out when the joint won't close. And for a moment, you genuinely can't tell if you measured wrong or if the plan was wrong. So you do what most people do. You assume it was you. And here's what all three of these situations have in common. Not skill, not tools, not effort. The plan was never built. Every single one of these moments, the storage bench that won't close, the coop that never got finished, the end table with the wrong tenon, every one of them traces back to the same root problem. Someone designed those plans at a desk and published them without ever testing whether they worked on a real workbench. The gaps, the wrong dimensions, the missing steps. Those aren't editing mistakes. They're what happens when a plan is drawn instead of built. That distinction took me years to fully understand. And once I understood it, I started looking for something different. After enough wasted weekends, I stopped asking, "What am I doing wrong?" and started asking a different question entirely. What would a plan look like if the person who designed it had actually built it first? The answer seems obvious in hindsight. Every measurement would be verified against real lumber, not nominal dimensions. Every step would be written in the order you actually perform it, not the order that looks clean on paper. The confusing parts would be rewritten because the designer would have experienced the confusion himself. That's the standard I started looking for, and eventually, I found a library built entirely around that principle. The approach behind it is straightforward. No plan gets published until it's been physically built in a real workshop, not reviewed, not checked by another designer. Built. Every joint tested. Every measurement verified to a 1/16 of an inch. If a step is confusing, it gets rewritten before it ships. What that means in practice is something I hadn't experienced before with downloaded plans. You open the file and the cut list matches what you actually pick up at the lumber yard. The assembly steps are in the right order. The diagrams show the hard parts, the joints, the squaring, the hardware, not just the finished piece. The chicken coop I mentioned at the start of this video, I built it using one of those plans. I typed small chicken coop into the library's search bar on a Saturday morning. Got 9 results. Picked the one sized for my backyard. The materials list told me exactly what to buy. No guessing, no nominal versus actual confusion. I came home from the lumber yard, followed the steps, and had a finished coop by Sunday evening. My neighbor came over Monday morning, looked at it, and asked how much I'd charge to build her one. I said $400. She said yes before I finished the sentence. That's not a remarkable story, it's just what building from a tested plan feels like. You stop compensating, you stop second-guessing. You just build. I want to address something you might be thinking right now because it's the same thing I thought. That sounds useful, but my shop is half a garage. I've got a table saw, a drill, and not a lot of room to maneuver. Is this actually going to work for someone in my situation? Yes. And here's why I can say that with confidence. The library I use was built by someone who started in a 7 by 8 foot workshop. Not a metaphor, literally 7 by 8 feet. Most of the plans are designed around a basic tool set: table saw, drill, clamps, and a sander. No CNC machine. No router required. No $5,000 tool list. I know a guy, Dennis, retired, working out of half his garage in Baton Rouge, who built a wall-mounted tool cabinet and a step stool from this same library. His words, "Plenty of plans in here that work for tight spaces." He didn't renovate his garage. He didn't buy new equipment. He just used plans that were designed for real-world constraints instead of ideal-world workshops. And then there's Kevin in Denver, who'd only ever built one shelf before he found this library. He used it to build a bunk bed for his kids. Solid pine. Still standing 8 months later. Saved his family several $100s compared to buying retail. The reason it works for both of them comes down to one thing. The plan was built before it reached them. That's it. That's the whole principle. When someone has already made the mistakes in their workshop so you don't have to make them in yours, the skill gap closes faster than you'd expect. I want to be honest with you about something, because I think it's important. If you close this video and nothing changes, I have a pretty good idea of what the next 6 months look like. There's a project you've been meaning to start. Maybe it's a workbench. Maybe it's that deck your family keeps asking about. Maybe it's something for the grandkids. You'll find a plan eventually. Probably free. Probably from the same sources you've used before. You'll start it. And somewhere around step 4 or 5, it'll go sideways in a way you don't quite understand, and you'll put it down with the intention of coming back. 6 months from now, it'll still be sitting there. Not because you lack the skill, not because you lack the time or the tools or the motivation, because the plan let you down again and you'll absorb that as something about yourself instead of something about the plan. The alternative is simpler than it sounds. It's having a plan you can trust completely, one where the cut list matches the lumber yard, the steps are in the right order, and the confusing parts have already been figured out for you in someone else's workshop. You find the project you want to build. You download the plan, you buy exactly what's on the list, and you build it, start to finish, the same weekend you started. That's not a fantasy. That's just what woodworking feels like when the plans are finished. You've already been putting in the effort. You've been showing up to the shop, buying the lumber, clearing the Saturdays. The plans just haven't been keeping up with you. Every project you've started and not finished, that's not a record of failure. That's a record of effort meeting a system that wasn't built to support it. The next project doesn't have to go the same way. If you want to see the library I use for every build, the one behind the chicken coop and everything else I've mentioned in this video, I left the link in the description. Take a look and decide for yourself. If this video gave you something useful, leave a comment below. I read every one of them. And if you know someone who's been stuck on a project they can't seem to finish, share this with them. It might be the most useful thing you send them all year. I'll see you in the next one.